Welcome into the Quest Number 9 podcast. My name is Seth Warner, and on this podcast, we talk about Kentucky basketball from a fan's perspective. And on this episode, we're going to be talking about Kentucky's 92-83 loss on the road in Gainesville to Florida, where Kentucky really just was not able to get over the hump. And today, we're going to have my guy Zach Gagan here to help us talk about this road loss for the Cats. Zach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Seth. Wish we had a better result to talk about, but it was still a fun, exciting game. Kind of told us a little bit about where this Kentucky team is right now. So, yeah, I'm ready to talk some ball with you for a little bit.
This game was somewhat close early. Kentucky was able to make some shots. It was 10-5 early for this Florida team. How do you think Kentucky kind of let go of the rope but was able to take that back in certain points of this game?
Yeah, we just kind of talked about it off air before we hit up the recording here. It's basically just a bunch of turnovers early on. 8 turnovers in the first 8 minutes for Kentucky. That led to 16 points off turnovers for Florida. Kentucky had 0 for comparison in that same span. So when you talk about how they got it down into a quick early hole, like that was kind of all it took. Just poor, careless turnovers, not really paying attention, not really as locked in as they should have been. That explained the first. I don't even know. I can look real quick at what the score was after those 8 turnovers, but let's see. So they're already down double digits. Yeah. So by the time they had that 8th turnover, they're already down 12 points, 22-10. A chunk of those points just coming because Kentucky couldn't hold on to the ball and Florida was able to get easy opportunities the other way. So that was basically the entire, you can boil it all down. The first half of the first half, first 10 minutes of the first half pretty much came down to that. And then once Kentucky kind of cleaned that up, throughout the rest of the first half and then going into the second half, that's really what allowed them to come back into this game. And then unfortunately some just poor defensive lapses on some of their better shooters down the stretch is really what cost Kentucky from getting over that hump. But yeah, those turnovers early on were ugly. And if they cleaned those up, like if you only have 4 of those turnovers, this game is probably a lot different going into halftime, maybe even in those first 10 minutes. And Kentucky's a little bit more in this game than they were, and you didn't have to try and crawl back from the 16. I don't even remember how many points it got to be. I think maybe 18-point hole for Kentucky at one point. So, yeah, those turnovers really cost them, and then just some bad defense at the end is really what prevented them from making that full-on comeback. So, and it was 16 was the largest lead in the second half there.
And for Kentucky, how do you think Kentucky was able to match Florida's physicality, especially in the first half?
Malachi Moreno, man, he was doing a great job. Especially in that first half. I think they were tied with rebounds, like 20-20, something like that. After the first half, Malachi did a great job of. That's something that Pope's really wanted to see more from him. He's talked about it in press conferences, things like that, wanting to see more physicality, more aggressiveness from Malachi, and just see that continue to grow each game. I really thought we saw it pretty prominently in that last win against Tennessee. And then this game, he came out and that's a tough front court to handle. Florida is all those guys are 6'9", 6'10", weigh over 200 pounds, big, huge bodies. Chinny-Lu's the best rebounder in the country right now. So for Malachi to do what he did, and while dealing with some foul trouble in that first half as well, like if he doesn't get, I think he had 3. He had 3 fouls in that first half. Only played 8 minutes and still grabbed 7 rebounds. So he was the only guy, or not really the only guy, but he was the main guy that was helping drive Kentucky, their physicality in that front court early on and helping them being able to match Florida's aggressiveness. Eventually as the game went on, Florida's just overwhelming size and strength kind of got the better of Kentucky. But in that first half, like Malachi set the tone for him and really prevented Chinny-Lu. I think Chinny-Lu had some foul trouble as well in that first half, or even in the game in general. But yeah, Kentucky did a great job of coming out and matching that. That wasn't the issue, it felt like, at all. So I was impressed with what we saw from there. There was definitely some they kind of let off the brakes a little, or let off the gas a little bit in the second half in regards to the physicality. But like I said, it's just hard to compete with that Florida size for 40 minutes. So I was impressed with how Kentucky did in the first half. And then, like you said, kind of slipped up in the second half there. But Malachi really set the tone there. I'm trying to see who else had some rebound. Brandon Garrison had some good minutes. Yelovich had some good minutes in terms of trying to match the physicality. But doing it against that Florida front court, especially Handlogged and coming off the bench, another 7-footer. Like they kind of just have a rotating 4-man crew of just the biggest guys in college basketball. And that's just tough to deal with for a full game.
In Kentucky, like you were saying, Malachi Moreno foul trouble. You were talking about Brandon Garrison gave you a couple good rebounds, but I thought there was a big difference when I love Brandon, but his physicality and ability to just knock Tangaloo off his spot and be able to get those contested rebounds was just a big difference for the Cats.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it like you said, like we like what Brandon Garrison could do, and I think we didn't really see too much out of Mo Diabate in that first half as well. Maybe it could have used a little bit more of him in terms of trying to match that physicality, but they did, like, honestly, I was impressed with what Kentucky did in the first half on that end. So I don't have, we can kind of nitpick it as much as we want. Like if Malachi doesn't get in the foul trouble, maybe things go a little bit differently. But he played pretty much the whole fourth quarter second half with 4 fouls. Or at least I think the final 18 minutes of that game, he was dealing with 4 fouls, and he was able to still, that probably helped or hurt Kentucky's ability to be physical and competitive down low. And I think other guys, he wasn't the only guy that had foul trouble in the game. Like, Brandon Garrison fouled out in this one. Aberdeen and Owe both had 4. So down the stretch, it really hurt Kentucky's ability to be aggressive and be as physical as they wanted to because of how the referees were calling the game there. So, but yeah, I thought there were some solid minutes off the bench from the rest of the bigs. I could just keep coming back to it. That was just hard to compete with a team that big for that long.
Yeah, especially with that foul trouble. But Kentucky also had 4 guys in double figures, was able to score 87 points. We know that's been an issue this year with the Cats being able to make shots and be able to score at a high level with these really good teams. What do you think Kentucky was able to do to really be able to put up 83 points on one of the best defensive teams in the country?
Well, Colin Chandler got hot, and that second half is the main thing. Like, he's just kind of a coin flip shooter right now from deep. Actually, I could look up real quick what he's shooting from SEC play. He's 46.4% from 3 on nearly 5 attempts per game in SEC play. So he's just been shooting the ball really well. He was 4 for 6 in that second half from deep against Florida. So it felt like he was just kind of maybe he was hesitant a little bit in the first half. Maybe hesitant might not even be the right word, but just not as willing to fire up the same threes that he was in the second half. And then once he gets in a groove, he's just really tough to slow down. And he can shoot him off the dribble, off the catch, off screens. So he doesn't have to be a spot up guy. He can really beat you in a lot of ways there. So he helped Kentucky stay alive down the stretch there. Denzel Aberdeen, the shooting percentages weren't great, but and I do think he was pressing a little bit at times playing against his former school, but he was able to will Kentucky to baskets in that second half there when they really needed him. Malachi had some big buckets as well. So, I don't think maybe it's, I'm trying to think of why, because I actually kind of predicted a lower scoring game. I think most people did. I don't think many people thought this would be played into the 90s or the 80s. But I think that's a testament to Kentucky's ability to kind of adapt as the game went along. Like we talked about the 8 turnovers in 8 minutes, and then they only finished with, what was it, 14 on the game or something like that? You said
it was 14.
So only 6 turnovers the final 30 minutes. They shot the ball a lot better. Kentucky had 49 points in the second half themselves. Like, they just found ways to kind of go at that Florida defense, really try and take advantage of some of the guards that Florida has. Florida was dealing with foul trouble as well, so that helped, going at guys like Chinyelu and maybe make them hesitate a little bit more in terms of wanting to block some shots or contest shots. So that certainly helped. But I mean, Kentucky had, the offense was fine. It really wasn't the offense in this game. It was the second half rebounding and defense that really kind of cost them.
And you're talking about some of those defensive mistakes for this Florida team. Had a couple guys really step up for them in Xavier Lee and
Klabchar.
Yeah, Klabchar.
However you say it.
I think that's how you say it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He had 19 points, 5 threes. One of the guys you're talking about, probably the main guy you're talking about when mistakes on threes.
Mm-hmm.
I heard him talk about on the broadcast, Coach Pope. They have a zone. But it's not a very good zone. He said in some of his presser stuff. So, but how do you think Kentucky made some mental lapses in that period, and what do you think they could do to change? Because similar things happened in the Tennessee game. Yeah,
and I mean, there's two threes in particular from Klabchar, kind of in the final 10 minutes or something like that. I think it was kind of in succession, maybe not back-to-back possessions, but pretty close to being back-to-back, where Kentucky just lost him. Florida is not a good three-point shooting team. You can kind of tip your hat to Xavier Lee, what he shot. What did he shoot from 3? He was 4 for 7 from 3. He was the guy that I think he made his first three as well. So he was 3 for 3 to start. He's a 24% 3-point shooter in SEC play. So if he goes 4 for 7, some of those were like guarded threes as well. So if he goes 4 for 7, you can kind of tip your hat. But to have Clavshard go 5 for 11, and he's the one guy on Florida's roster that shoots better than 40% on high volume. He's the one guy that or maybe not 40%, but like high 30s at least. The one guy on Florida's roster that you just cannot leave open because he's going to make you pay. So to have him shoot 11 3-pointers was really just a pretty big disappointing defensive number there for Kentucky. That number has to be in half. Like he can shoot 5 or 6 of them and make 3, but he can't go 5 for 11 because a couple of those down the stretch were backbreakers when Kentucky was really trying to make that push. Got it down to 2 points at one point. And I think it might have been Clavshard that hit a 3, maybe the next possession or the possession after that. So, and they were just easy things too, like just kind of forgetting where you are on the screen, like not communicating as well as they should have been. So those were disappointing to see go in, because the game is probably a little bit different if Kentucky's able to defend those, or if he just straight up misses those threes. So those were tough. Those were ones you can't have happen. The Xavier Lee ones you can take a little bit more. Like they let Boogie Flange shoot 3 threes. He goes 0 for 3. He had 2 that he, almost one airball, one almost airballed. So like Kentucky's game plan coming out of the gates was to let Fland and Lee shoot. Fland wasn't making them. Lee was. You kind of take that, like that split there. If you're asking for that, like if you say that those two combined go 4 for 10 from 3, it's not ideal for Kentucky, but you can handle that a little bit more than Clavshard by himself going 5 for 11. So that was really the backbreaker. And then just the offensive rebounds from Florida in the second half were really tough. Like Chinyelu just kind of became the, Oscar level rebounder that he is right now, or has been playing like. It helps that he's got all those other bigs in there as well that kind of help soak up some space. So it allows him a little bit more area to actually go after those boards and kind of beat up on Kentucky's guys. And again, Malachi had 4 fouls for a lot of that game, so he's having to battle that. Balance not wanting to foul while still being aggressive. So, but those two, like I can think of the 2 Clavshard threes in my head right now that were just like, man, you can't have those happen. So, those are things that are all fixable. Those are all correctable. All you got to do is just communicate a little bit better. And Kentucky has shown the ability to lock in on defense there. And I don't think they did it. I mean, they gave up 92 points and Florida scored 40 plus in each half. So there was definitely other things that they could have fixed up from this. But I mean, Florida's a top 15 offense and defensive team in the country. Like by the metrics, they're a top 5 team in the country. So sometimes you just run into a really good juggernaut of a team, and that's what Kentucky did. So I think it is nice that they get to play them again to the end of the season back in Rupp. So you can really learn from those mistakes and try and have a slightly altered game plan going into March 7th, I think is when they play. So, but yeah, man, those Clavshard threes were just Clavshard, however you say his name. Those were backbreakers. Those were tough to let go in, just from a defensive game plan perspective, because those shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, to me, kind of how I thought about it is Kentucky played good, especially outside that first 8 minutes, but Florida just played really good and was able to execute and was able, like you were saying, especially in that second half, they out-rebounded Kentucky by 8 in the second half.
Yeah.
Ended up winning the rebounding battle 45-37, and some of those were 2-possession game. They get 3 offensive rebounds, then they score, and we could have had it down to 2 in an extra 40 seconds on the clock. We could add it down to a 1-possession game, an extra 40 seconds on the clock with a minute and a half, 2 minutes left. So some of those things, like you were saying, Malachi, I thought Yelovich came in and made a couple shots. He ended up with 4 boards. Yeah. Statistically, he's one of our better defensive rebounders.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes he doesn't always show it. But defensively, I thought he was solid. Sometimes he can get lost. But overall, I thought Kentucky was able to give themselves an opportunity, like we were saying, outside of those early turnovers against a team this good. How do you think Kentucky will be able to translate some of this stuff against a really athletic Georgia team coming up on Tuesday?
Well, they should be prepared to deal with that athleticism because Florida's got a bunch of in their front court. So, and I think like going into the Florida game, you had a whole week off, so maybe they overthought it a little bit. Maybe that doesn't happen this time around because you've got a quick turnaround with the Tuesday game against the Georgia team you should beat. So hopefully there's a bit of a not necessarily a revenge factor, but like, a bounce back factor for Kentucky, knowing that they didn't necessarily give it away because Florida was just kind of the better team from start to finish. But, Kentucky had ample chances to come back and not only tie the game, but take the lead. So I think that was a pretty, like, if you're going to lose, if you're Kentucky, I don't think that was a terrible way to lose, because you still showed that you are capable of competing with a team like Florida. I think that's important because they are a potential Final Four talent. So proving that you can at least compete with them and not getting blown out by 25 like you did against Vandy, I think was notable. Even though they did kind of succumb to the giant deficits again, got down by 18, but to be able to come back again, unlike they did against Vandy, I thought showed a little, some more resilience than maybe they would have had even a few weeks ago. So, I'm excited to watch them play again against Georgia. It's definitely a matchup that will favor Kentucky. Being back at home as well always helps. So, I do think you're going to see a nice bounce back effort kind of all around from everyone, and hopefully just walk away with a relatively easy win, as easy as they can be in SEC play.
Now with the SEC standings, it still puts Kentucky within striking distance of a SEC title, but puts them in a little bit more of a hole. I was looking at put them in about sixth place, not counting tiebreakers very much, but we'll see how that goes as the season progresses. How do you think Kentucky how many games they'll need to win to really put themselves in a good situation?
Yeah, we actually did kind of a little exercise for this this morning on KS board, but just like projecting the final 6 games or whatever it is for Kentucky. And I was looking, I'm going to pull it up right now. That's what I'm doing, looking over here. Got Georgia, Auburn, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, and Florida. I think it's pretty feasible to at least win 3 of those games, and that puts you at, what is that? That'll put you at 11 wins in SEC play. 12 is probably what you need to get that double bye, to get the top 4 seed. I think they should take care of Georgia at home. On Tuesday, they should be able to get South Carolina on the road next week. And then of the remaining 4 games, you got to kind of maybe win a couple toss-ups. So, can they beat Albert on the road? Can they get revenge against Vanderbilt at home? Texas A&M kind of started off hot in the SEC and kind of cooled off a little bit. Maybe that'll be a good opportunity for Kentucky to go steal a game down there in College Station. And then you got Florida back at home, which will probably still be favored in Florida, but Kentucky, a game that Kentucky can easily, well, not easily, but a game that they can win. So I think 4-2 is the goal. Well, obviously the goal is to go 6-0, but if you're trying to be a little bit more realistic, I think the goal is to go 4-2, put yourself at 12 and I guess that would be 12-8, maybe. No, 12-6. 12-6 in SEC play, and that probably gets you the double bye. Especially having the wins over Tennessee and Arkansas as tiebreakers will be nice. So if you can get that and go into SEC play and starting on Friday in the SEC tournament as opposed to Thursday, that would just be. I think there's a real opportunity for that to happen, but there's also not a situation where they go 2 for 4 and, maybe collapse a little bit. And I don't think they're going to be in the bottom 4 starting on Wednesday or anything, but probably starting on Thursday for the SEC tournament. So it's, it all depends. Like if you can come out and really kind of take it to Georgia and prove that you're in that upper echelon, then I'll feel good going into the final 5 games of the regular season after that.
Yeah. In this Texas A&M team you talked about going on the road there, they had lost 4 straight at the moment when they're going into their game coming up against Ole Miss on Wednesday. So they've lost 4 in a row. Mm-hmm. They were actually number 1 in the standings for a couple weeks, right?
Yeah, a couple weeks, probably 2 or 3 weeks for sure.
Yeah.
They were 7-1 at one point in the SEC. Now they're 7-5.
Yeah. And that Auburn team on the road, I think, is going to be one of the tougher games just because that place is so hard to play in. Arkansas went there and got beat by 25.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of a hard place to play. And
I know they were missing their best player in their game over the weekend. I don't know what Keyshawn Hall, he was out, so I don't know if he's still got like a lingering issue, if it's a long-term thing, if he's not going to play next weekend. I'm sure that'll be something that we'll know more about as the week goes along.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any updates on him or his status or anything, but if he doesn't play next Saturday, then you really feel good about Kentucky's chances, but I imagine he'll find a way to take the floor when Kentucky comes to town.
So that's all from the Quest Number 9 podcast. Zach, do you want to tell people where they can find your work?
Yeah, as always, you can find me on KentuckySportsRadio.com. I'm on Twitter at ZGagan Gagan is, you can see it right there, GeoGheGan. I also do a basketball breakdown podcast on the KSR YouTube called Zoom Action with my friend Brandon Ramsey. You can check that out on, like I said, on our KSR YouTube page. We'll probably do one later this week after the Georgia game to kind of recap the Florida and Georgia games, and hopefully we're talking about a Georgia win and not 2 losses for that episode. So, but yeah, that's where you can find me.
And that's all from this episode. You can go like and subscribe, and you can go follow me at Quest9 on Instagram and Twitter. I put up new stuff when I post new episodes, and I will see you next time. Go Cats.